Courage the Cowardly Dog is an all-time Cartoon Network classic horror with 4 seasons running at about 52 episodes total. It even has a crossover movie with the iconic Scooby-Doo. It's safe to say that Courage has made a place in all of our hearts. And our nightmares, I might add. While Cartoon Network is known for having darker themes behind most of their shows, Courage the Cowardly Dog takes the cake in being the creepiest. And while the famous cartoon does have its humor, it is the only Cartoon Network show to be primarily described as a horror series.
We interrupt this program to bring you Courage the Cowardly Dog Show, starring Courage the Cowardly Dog!
Now for a little bit of context. Courage the Cowardly Dog takes place in the middle of nowhere, which just so happens to be located in a fictional town in Kansas. As somebody who grew up in Nebraska, I can tell you that the name is quite fitting. Courage is, you guessed it, quite cowardly. He's an adopted puppy who takes care of his owners, Muriel and Eustace. And while he might be cowardly, the entire series is about how he fights a plethora of different spirits and monsters to protect his adoptive family. Muriel acts as the mother of the household and the damsel in distress in most episodes. She cooks and cleans and watches over the house in most areas. She even protects Courage from Eustace, who quite frequently belittles and purposely tries to scare Courage. Eustace, on the other hand, is quite an old man, grumpy-like character. He runs the farm and most of the time hates Courage. His animation is scary looking too. Look at those soulless eyes. Muriel could do better, I'm just saying. Last, but certainly not least of the main family, is the computer. Courage turns to the household desk computer to help him find knowledge on how to deal with the villain of that respective episode. Computer is loyal, and does have its own personality and speaks occasionally to Courage. When it does speak, it has a British accent.
If Johnny has 3 apples and Davy has 2 apples, why don't they just shut up and eat?
Important? Probably not, but I know you are all dying to know. Courage the Cowardly Dog is notoriously creepy, especially for children, its target audience. Some of the common creeps that show up during the show are Cats, who is the most important villain in the show and is considered to be Courage's arch nemesis and main antagonist throughout the show. He appears to be a slinky red cat. Get it? Cat? With glowing yellow eyes and purple highlights throughout his body. He also will be commonly seen wearing an outfit to match whatever scheme he decides to plan for that day. Another common villain is the Quack, an evil duck who commonly wants to steal money or other valuables from others. He's a con artist and isn't afraid to get his hands dirty with the law. Last, but certainly not least of the villains, is Fred. Fred isn't a common recurring character, but his backstory is vast. Fred is addicted to cutting people's hair. And while being a regular human, he's one of the creepiest villains in my opinion. He is so much addicted to hair that he is part of the Home for Freaky Barbers institution. With Courage being a dog, you guys can probably guess there will be an unwanted haircut later on in the show. The first episode begins with Courage, Muriel, and Eustace stopping at the Cat's motel after being caught in a rather intense storm. Once entering the motel, they are greeted by Cats, who, becoming aware of Courage's existence, rudely snaps at the family and shows them the no dogs allowed sign. Eustace, not really liking Courage, happily takes Courage outside and ties him to a pole.
What did I do?
Muriel, on the other hand, tucks Courage into a blanket before telling him that it will only be for one night. Not long after both parties are settled in their respective areas, a strange box reveals a large horrifying spider that attacks Courage. Meanwhile, another spider is released into Muriel's bath. After Courage escapes, he instantly goes to try and help Muriel, who insists that he go wake Eustace for help instead. When Courage goes to get him, however, nothing seems to be able to wake him up. When Courage goes back to try again, he notices that Eustace is missing.
My loves, dinner has arrived.
He goes downstairs to try and find help, but nobody's there to help him. Because nobody's in the lobby, Courage decides to go into the private employees only door to try and find somebody, but is greeted by Eustace being completely tied up in a spider web. Don't worry, folks. Courage defeats the spiders by squashing them with a large wooden plank. Cats appears and reveals his evil plans to get rid of the whole family by using his giant spiders. So Courage quickly evades Cats by throwing Eustace's tied-up body onto him. Thus, the chase scene between the two commence. Cats eventually corners Courage and challenges him to a game before he ends him. Quite gruesome for a child's cartoon, I might add. Meanwhile, Muriel, being the queen that she is, defeats the spider all by herself and begins searching for Courage. Right as Courage is too tired to continue playing, with Cats hovering over him with one of the horrendous spiders, Muriel comes in and whacks Cats over the head with a tennis racket.
Come on, Courage. We're leaving. The service here stinks.
The episode concludes with them all happily driving back to their little farm. In this later episode, the audience is introduced to another notorious Courage the Cowardly Dog villain, LeQuack, a specialist con artist who's looking for some valuables. The episode starts off with Eustace being a horrible husband and father, as per usual.
Will you stop that noise? You'll wake the neighbors.
We ain't got no neighbors!
He's working on the roof, and while doing this, a spare board breaks off and hits poor Muriel in the head. After this, she doesn't remember anything. Eustace takes this opportunity to throw Courage out of the house and tell Muriel that her only duties are making him food and basically doing whatever he asks of her. Courage, obviously trying to save Muriel and help out his current situation as well, calls up a doctor in hopes to cure her of her amnesia. But instead of a real doctor showing up, LeQuack impersonates a doctor in hopes that he will be able to steal all of the family's valuables. Once at the house, LeQuack knocks out Eustace and heads inside for Muriel. This causes Courage to come in and try to save her.
Little doggy, the sweet, come here. Are you the patient?
But in his efforts, LeQuack chases him with a giant mallet out of the house. Once back in the house, LeQuack tries to get information out of Muriel on where the jewels are, but she has amnesia, so nothing works. Courage finds his way back into his open window and contacts the police through the computer. While trying to get information out of Muriel, LeQuack hits her with a mallet, which allows her to get her memories back. Although this doesn't really help anybody's situation because she's still tied up. The police eventually show up and arrest LeQuack right before he is close to eliminating Courage. They then find Eustace in the closet with, you guessed it, amnesia. Courage just leaves him in the closet. LOL. This show then cuts to a shot of LeQuack escaping the police car and claiming that this isn't the last we'll see of him. In the following episode, we meet Muriel's creepy nephew, Fred. The first glimpse of Fred we get is in the eyes of Courage. Courage has been worried to meet Fred, as Courage is worried to do almost anything in life, but instead of being relieved, he's greeted by one of the creepiest, strangest looking humans he's ever laid eyes on. While sitting on the couch with Fred, Courage happens to notice a band around his wrist that reads, "Home for Freaky Barbers." Courage tries to alert Muriel of this, but instead she insists that Courage show Fred where the bathroom is. The bathroom that Eustace just got done explaining locks whenever the door gets shut.
Just don't try shutting it, cause you won't be able to get it open.
Muriel realizes that she forgot to get Fred some fresh towels, so she asks Eustace to bring him some. When Eustace gets up the stairs though, he decides to shove the towels into Courage's chest and slam the door shut with him and Freaky Fred inside. Part 1000 so far of Eustace being a horrible human, and we haven't even gotten past the third episode I'm covering yet. While Courage is locked in the bathroom with Fred, Fred retells his haircutting origins, while slowly cutting more and more of Courage's hair.
The look upon my young love's face was sweet as lace.
Courage finally gets a glimpse of the number on Fred's wrist, but he quickly hides it and shoves pancakes in Courage's mouth so he can't speak on the phone. Fred finishes cutting Courage's hair, and while he's distracted happy dancing, Courage calls the number again and asks for help. The hair police show up and institutionalize Fred once again. And while Courage is already completely shaved, at least he's free from the freakiness that is Fred. I'm including this episode because it scared me the most when I was a kid. I'm not sure if it was the creepy animation style they chose or the voice of the ghost of King Ramses the Pharaoh, but either way, it was total nightmare fuel for me when I was a child. I'm not going to get too deep into this episode, but it was essentially about how Eustace got his hands on a super valuable stone that was an important artifact. The spirit then comes to the house demanding it back.
Return the slab, or suffer my curse.
And threatens them with curses if they don't listen. Of course, he doesn't listen. But look at how absolutely horrifying that thing is. Look at him. I mean, come on, how is that not creepy?
Return the slab.
In a later episode, they run into Courage's most infamous arch-nemesis, cats. This episode starts with Muriel dragging Courage and Eustace out of their farmland onto a cruise. Courage accidentally throws up into the engines because he got seasick, and they end up crashing onto a deserted island.
Now look where we are. And where's my chair?
Once on the island, they are greeted by cats. who is disguising himself as the owner of a 5-star resort. Muriel and Eustace happily join the resort, but Courage is quite suspicious of the whole situation.
You must be wiped out from your excruciating experience.
Where's my chair?
While on their way to a spa that Katz is offering, Courage stumbles upon the captain of their fallen ship, turned into a soda machine, and he warns Courage to get off of the island. Courage tries to warn his owners, but they can't understand him. As they enter the spa, they find that much like the other encounter with Katz, the spa is a no-dog zone. They also tie Courage up again. I'm getting deja vu. Not long after Courage hears screaming from the spa and witnesses people being taken out after being turned into machines, Eustace is a wrecking ball and Muriel is a washing machine. Katz takes them to a coliseum for them to fight each other. In a rage, Courage goes back to the spa and turns himself into a helicopter to rescue Muriel.
That's my chair!
Finders keepers.
Eustace then destroys the entire island in a fit of rage and the episode ends. Later on, they are bombarded by cats yet again. This time though, Katz genuinely needs them for a purpose as he has been unable to win the Nowhere Sweet Stuff contest. The episode starts with Katz using his jam monster to kidnap Muriel in hopes to gain her secret recipe for her candy apples. Katz threatens Muriel with her life to spill the beans, or rather, apples, but she doesn't budge. Meanwhile, Eustace arrives home and notices them missing and instantly starts to follow the jam trail left by the jam monster. Courage chews off his bubblegum restraints and blows a bubble all the way up to Katz and lands on him, preventing him from sending Muriel to her doom. They fall down the stairs, and as the pattern goes, Katz decides to challenge Courage to a game before ending him. This time, it just so happens to be a staring contest.
Blink, blink, blink.
Courage's concentration is broken when he's startled by Eustace, who just scared off the purple jam monster. Because Courage lost the competition, Katz throws him into his gumdrop-making machine and he turns into candy. Meanwhile, Eustace helps Muriel down from her trap and starts battling Katz himself. Okay, Eustace, we see you. Courage rolls up and sends Katz into the taffy machine, ultimately saving Eustace and turning Katz into taffy. Muriel then reveals that the secret ingredient she uses is vinegar. The show then cuts to Katz still only getting second place in the competition while Courage and Muriel won first. LeQuack is back. He did tell us that wasn't going to be the last of him. This episode starts with LeQuack deciding he wants to hypnotize the baggers. He shows up at their door and says he's there to fix their TV, to which they say it isn't broken. He then goes onto their roof and breaks their antenna and waits until they call him again for it to get fixed. He presumably fixes it and leaves.
Huh?
Duck is good, dog is bad.
But soon after, the TV starts hypnotizing Eustace and orders him to get rid of Courage.
Like this. Good puppy.
When Courage is taken care of, LeQuack orders both him and Muriel, using the hypnotizing TV, to go steal the lottery money from the jackpot lottery that is going on at the time. Eustace and Muriel drive to go get the money.
Well, howdy.
Golly, a clown.
And while Muriel is distracting the guard, Eustace sneaks in. They have no idea that Courage, in his hopes to stop them, sneaks in as well. Courage, being conniving in his fear, starts leaving a money trail out of the car so that people will be able to see where the stolen lottery money is going. The police end up following the money trail, and ultimately, LeQuack is caught once again. Although, much like last time, LeQuack escapes and threatens that this, yet again, is not the last we will be seeing of him. In a later episode, we finally get to actually meet the computer of the family. The episode starts with Courage writing in his little diary, which is located on the computer. While reading Courage's memories, the computer tells Courage that he isn't courageous at all, and he could do better if he was given the chance. Later that night, a bad thunderstorm hits and causes every electronic in the house to be electrified. The computer, so much so that it springs to life, grows a body, allowing it to move. Now seemingly sentient and alive, the computer downloads itself into sleepy Eustace and possesses his body. But Eustace's body proves inadequate for the computer and claims they need one with more meat. Computer switches and decides to possess Muriel instead, as she seemingly has, more meat. Computer, now using Muriel's body as a seemingly supersuit, decides to go around the world and perform what he thinks are courageous acts. Courage then tries to save Muriel and keep the computer and her from dying during these strenuous tasks.
Skiing! Off the top of the Empire State Building and into a sewer! Ooh!
Ironically, Courage sacrifices his body repeatedly to save the one he loves, is much more courageous than any of the stunts the computer pulled during his adventures. The computer eventually gets stuck in one of their endeavors and asks Courage to help them before they die. Courage does, but not without getting zapped in the process. The computer picks Courage up and takes him home and returns to his original state, claiming that being a human was boring even after all the adventures he partook in. Muriel then reads about all the adventures that happened while she was unconscious and thinks it's just Courage's imagination. This episode plays a parody on awkward family situations regarding mother-in-laws, although I'm sure Muriel's experience is much stranger than most. For context, this episode contains a business called Growth Industries. This company is obsessed with people who have ABXYZ hair types because their hair growing formula works best on them. As per usual, Muriel is the victim since she unfortunately does have this rare genetic blood type. The episode starts with Growth Industries asking the doctors if they have any patients with the ABXYZ blood types, as they have been running low on test subjects. And after some slight bribing, the doctors reluctantly tell them about Muriel.
How about this much?
Growth Industries show up at the farm and coerce Muriel to their lab even though she makes it clear she doesn't want to go. Now, I might add that Courage doesn't agree with this and feels like something is up. As per usual, he's the only character who thinks things through, and immediately decides to ask the doctor and see what's up.
It would be unethical to reveal my patient's personal information. So please don't call me again unless there is big bucks involved.
After going to the clinic and seeing her file, he realizes that she's been taken by Growth Industries against her will. Courage also shows Eustace, as he probably assumes he will need help getting her back. But plot twist, when they arrive at Growth Industries, they find that the owner of the business is none other than Eustace's mother, Ma. Upon further questioning, Ma denies knowing anything about Muriel being there. That is, until Courage sneaks back into the building and finds Muriel, along with several other people, being tested on, horrifically hanging from the ceiling and going through crazy tests and torture. Courage quickly finds Muriel and causes a whole scene by tripping fire alarms, fighting off all the guards, evading Ma, and jumping out the window with Muriel in order to escape. And this episode concludes with them going home safely, and Eustace coming home with a head full of hair and a lot of cash. From being a test subject, Eustace will do anything for money, and Courage will do anything for Muriel, as per usual. In a later episode, similarly to the last we covered, Ma is trying to take advantage of Muriel and ruin her and Eustace's relationship. The episode starts with strange, hurtful things happening to Eustace throughout the day, all of which seem to happen around Muriel. This leads Eustace to believe that Muriel was actually intentionally trying to hurt him, which was simply not the case. Eustace calls his Ma to complain, and she shows up claiming she has a counseling license. She doesn't.
And I'm gonna help you with what's her name work out your problems, you stupid boy.
She gives them a counseling session, but before even trying, she claims that their marriage is unfixable. Courage doesn't like the arguing / Ma's response, so he decides to use computer to get his own counseling license instead. During the counseling lesson led by Courage, everything goes smoothly and they make up.
I guess it all started with me mom. She never liked me.
Meanwhile, Ma's approached by a ghost woman who claims that she has been the one messing with Eustace. She believes that Muriel's ancestors threw her husband into the lake containing Loch Ness that resulted in their death. Ma believes her and agrees to continue trying to ruin their relationship. Ma goes into the room and accuses Muriel of doing more harmful things towards Eustace, and the ghost helps her conjure up her claims. Courage sees this happen and starts using ink blots on Ma to try and distract her from continuing the plan. When looking at the ink blots, Ma goes into a sort of trance and starts opening up about her life. One important detail in particular, how her ancestors threw a man into the lake with Loch Ness, resulting in his death. This infuriated the Phantom and resulted in the Phantom chasing Ma out of the house. In a later episode, a villain finally mainly focuses on Courage for once, instead of his owners. While happily licking his bone outside, Courage meets a strange lady who becomes instantly obsessed with him, claiming that he looks like her old dog Duncan. Muriel sees her affection and assumes that Courage made a friend and invites her inside their home to have a cup of tea. Once inside, they learn that she's actually a storm goddess who has lost her dog, explaining why she's absolutely obsessed with Courage. It becomes clear that she is too obsessed with Courage, and Muriel starts to become aware of this issue.
Muriel, this place is a mess. Clean it up.
During dinner, the storm goddess claims that she is the owner of Courage and will be taking him with her when she leaves.
I just can't imagine never seeing my sweet Duncan. Courage again.
Good deal.
This upsets Muriel, and she instantly becomes defensive since Courage is, obviously, her dog. Courage takes advantage of the strong winds from the storm goddess's anger and uses it to fly away in search of her lost dog Duncan. It isn't until someone says that they've seen Duncan that Courage is directed towards the sewers. Once in the sewers, Courage eventually arrives at the God Bone. It is said that once you start licking it, you become addicted to it and lick until you die. Courage hears someone licking it, so he waddles around the bone and finds Duncan. Too bad the urges start to get at Courage as well. The only thing that allows him to break free is the image of Muriel dying by the hands of the storm goddess. If he fails in his mission to bring back Duncan. Eventually, Courage becomes free and takes the bone back to his house. But then yet another issue arises. The storm goddess is jealous at how much Duncan likes the God Bone and decides she'll just keep Courage instead. Courage decides to pretend to give in to the storm goddess and starts reciprocating her energy and affection. This makes Duncan jealous and he too gets free from the dog bone. Everyone went back to their respective owners and lived happily ever after. Not only is Eustace sick in this episode, but the computer gets sick too. The episode starts with Muriel trying to find something yummy to make Eustace to make him feel better, but he dislikes her recipes because they contain vinegar. Muriel and Courage look for a new recipe online.
What does this one do? Oh my!
But the recipe takes a long time to download. Muriel comes back into the room to check on the computer, and the computer ends up sucking Muriel into him because of his virus. Courage goes into the computer as well and tries desperately to fight and save Muriel from the virus. Muriel realizes that the virus is a literal virus and is indeed sick and offers him some of her special gelatin that she originally made for Eustace, and he hated it. She gives the virus some, and he eats it up after finding out it has vinegar. He loves vinegar. Anyway, the episode concludes with Muriel being free of the computer and feeding Eustace the good artichoke soup recipe, even though that too had vinegar. Making yet another epic appearance, Katz tries to ruin everyone's day yet again.
Crispy bacon, and Canadian ham, and sausages, and a steak.
Muriel and Courage are tired of Eustace and books themselves their own little vacation, which just so happens to be run by Katz. It's an underwater submarine type of situation, but right when they are about to board, Katz, as per usual, claims that no dogs are allowed. Courage ends up disguising himself as a ventriloquist doll and gets on anyway.
No, I am thirsty for a big drink.
Once on the submarine, Katz makes Muriel in charge of tea. Shortly after this, she finds something fishy, and Courage confirms her belief that there's something wrong with the tea. After Muriel confronts Katz about it, he throws her in a cell. Courage wrestles the key away from Katz to free Muriel from her cage. But in doing so, he breaks the controls to the submarine and they start plummeting into deeper waters. Katz presumably escapes, but is then seen getting eaten by a shark. Courage saves everyone by inflating himself with gas and blowing burp bubbles around everyone's body, so that when the ship was about to explode, they were able to safely float to the surface instead of dying horrifically. LeQuack enters the show again with another crazy antic plan that's super outlandish and random. This time, however, he's using Muriel to rob a Swedish bank. The episode starts off with Muriel and Courage in the kitchen making cookies. That is, until Eustace shows up not knowing where his glasses are. Can this man ever get his stuff together? Muriel instructs Courage to go outside and help Eustace look for his glasses. Much to Courage's dismay, LeQuack reveals himself.
LeQuack is back.
As per usual, neither of Courage's owners pay any mind to him, telling them that something is wrong. And while they aren't looking, LeQuack sneaks in and adds 2 ounces of rare Swedish vinegar to the recipe. Dumbfounded, Muriel doesn't know how she's going to get her hands on this rare ingredient to finish her cookies. That is, until LeQuack, who claims to be a part of an air balloon company, offers her a balloon ride to Sweden to fetch some rare Swedish vinegar. She excitedly accepts the invitation, much to Courage's demise. When on the hot air balloon, she is tied to a bungee cord and repeatedly thrown off the balloon through a trap door. She doesn't want to do this, though she doesn't really have a choice against gravity. LeQuack then finally reveals his true motives, which is to rob a massive Swedish piggy bank. After forcing Muriel to practice thoroughly, he takes her to the piggy bank.
Swedes were smart bringing us in to guard their money.
Big Roger on that. Go!
And claims that she will find her vinegar under the green leaves. When Muriel claims she notices that there is no vinegar and that the leaves look like foreign money, LeQuack pushes her off the balloon for good and begins to cut the cord to make her fall to her death. Courage catapults himself to save her, and they land in a shop that sells Swedish vinegar. They go home happy. While LeQuack gets to answer to the police that inevitably show up. In this later episode, Eustace finally gets what's coming to him. The episode starts off with multiple announcements that it's hunting season and that there's a big prize for whoever catches the biggest deer. This causes Eustace to showcase his inferiority complex towards his older brother by giving a shoe show to Muriel and Courage. He explains that he used to ask his older brother to go hunting with him, and he would always say no. Actually, not only would he say no, he would also tell Eustace that he was useless.
I ain't useless. I'm Eustace.
Presumably because the two names rhymed. Clearly, Eustace has some deep-rooted childhood trauma. Maybe that's why he's the way that he is. Moving on from Eustace's sad upbringing, he's motivated to start the hunting season to prove to himself that he's better than his older dead brother, which is unfortunate considering he missed all of his shots. Because the father deer noticed Eustace shooting at him and his family, he decides to get his own gun and hunt Eustace instead.
A deer's gotta do what a deer's gotta do.
Courage tries to prevent Eustace's death by having them play a less life-threatening game show. Unfortunately, Eustace still loses against the deer and tries to shoot him still. He misses and hits a deer lollipop. Eustace takes the deer antlers and puts his hunter's hat on the deer so that the bear thinks he isn't the real hunter. But unfortunately, nothing goes right for Eustace, and real hunters show up and thinks he's a deer because of his antlers. This, of course, results in him getting captured. This later episode is one of two of the only 20-minute-long episodes within the series of Courage the Cowardly Dog. It starts with a rather ominous person wearing a mask, showing up to the farm and starting to beat up Courage, claiming that they hate all dogs. Muriel misunderstands the situation as per usual and invites the masked person over for tea, thinking they were just playing with Courage. During tea time, the masked person reveals that their name is Kitty and tells a tale of their friend Bunny, who fell in love with a gangster named Mad Dog. This dog was abusive and threatened to kill Bunny if they ever tried to escape, or if Kitty was ever seen near them again. After telling their tale, Eustace makes a rude comment about how they would probably have better luck looking for Kitty if they would just take off their mask, to which the masked figure shoves all of the silverware from the table onto the ground. Later that day at dinner, the mask gets brought up again, and instead of getting violently angry, Kitty claims that they aren't afraid to face reality. When Muriel tells Kitty that everyone must face reality eventually, Kitty points out their flaws in reality, such as Muriel waking up in the middle of the night to eat sweet food, and Eustace's inability to fix anything despite being a fix-it man.
Do you think I eat too much?
Nah, the masked lady. I can fix anything.
Later on at bedtime, Courage spies on Kitty and learns after she takes off her mask that she's actually a cat. Shocker. I know. I mean, come on, Courage, think about her name. Anyway, Courage is completely convinced that the mask is actually an evil monster that takes over Kitty, and he begins having visions of the mask looking much more horrifying than it actually does. Courage then tries to warn Muriel and Eustace of the scary masked monster, but as per usual, they have no idea what he's trying to tell them. Since they aren't doing anything about Courage's perceived danger, he decides to lock everyone in their respective rooms as he steals Kitty's toy mouse as supposed evidence for the police. Later that night, while Courage is at his local diner, he learns of where Mad Dog is keeping Bunny from the diner's workers.
After you get Bunny out of there, tell her Charlie says, hey.
Meanwhile, after Courage is at the diner, every person in the house tries to escape, with Kitty being the only one since she decides to climb out of the window. She assumes Courage is the one who stole her toy, and she begins to search for it. Back at Mad Dog's place, Courage somehow frees Bunny, even while being persecuted by multiple dogs. While running away, Mad Dog starts crashing them in his car. Courage jumps onto the car and swerves them in the way of a train. Courage escapes relatively fine. Mad Dog might as well be roadkill. Kitty yells out to Bunny, as Kitty presumably caught the train to leave Courage's house, and Bunny tells Kitty about how Courage saved her life. Kitty then says that all dogs aren't bad, and they ride off into the night, clutching each other. Arguably one of the most important episodes, we learn of Courage's past and how he came to be a part of the Bag family. The episode starts with Courage seeing an ad for missing dogs, which is when all the flashbacks begin. The first flashback that Courage gets is how he was first separated. It starts with him playing catch with both of his dog parents. He somehow gets his head stuck in the pole, so his parents take him to the vet. The vet sets Courage free and kidnaps his parents. The flashback ends as a very worried Muriel continues to ask Courage what's wrong, but he doesn't respond. Eustace is also there, and eventually becomes worried as well. When they mention the vet, Courage is transported into another flashback. Only this time it's revealed that the vet had strange, alien-like animals locked up. And the vet is seen carrying his parents to their own secluded room. In real time, Muriel and Eustace take Courage to the vet, which just so happens to be the same vet that took his parents away. This causes Courage to flee from the office. Upon opening up one of the doors, another flashback takes over. Young Courage finds his parents being shoved into a rocket. Courage tries to save them, but the door had already locked them inside. Meanwhile, back in the present day, Courage is trying to reopen the door that led to the rocket, when all of a sudden, he's captured by the vet. The vet threatens Courage that now it's his turn to go into the rocket. Muriel and Eustace show up, furious, wondering what he's doing to Courage. The vet reveals that he's breeding dogs in space to make them larger and more buff. Once this is revealed, Courage goes back into another flashback. Sadly, while Courage is running away from the vet, he escapes, and he has to watch from afar as his parents get launched into space. Back in the present again, Courage escapes the rocket right as the vet puts Muriel and Eustace in with him. All of a sudden, Courage is trying yet again to save his parents from being launched into outer space, not willing to go out as easily as he did last time. Courage screams in the vet's stethoscope, steals his keys, and while he's distracted from his ears hurting, Courage unlocks the rocket door and frees his adoptive parents. He then puts the vet into the rocket instead, and he launches into space. Finally, a taste of his own medicine.
Courage, I knew you could do it.
Blah, blah, blah. He still ain't sitting at the table.
Courage has one more flashback, this time of something wholesome. Young Muriel finds Courage after the traumatic event and names him. Back in present day, Courage is seen loving every second of Muriel's comfort. The scene cuts to the vet on the other planet, with all the dogs ready to beat him up. When doing research, I found many claims that this is the scariest episode of Courage. Fitting, as they must have saved the best for last. The episode starts with a long day of time-consuming tasks that Courage isn't really the best at. All of a sudden, while Courage is trying to help Muriel make baklava, and failing badly at it, the perfectionist appears. The perfectionist resembles an old classic school teacher, but is more ugly and more put together. The perfectionist is there in order to make Courage perfect, claiming that he is a disgrace. She then has him complete a multitude of different tasks, including a perfect walk, make an exact replica of the Eiffel Tower perfectly, sleep perfectly. While trying to sleep, Courage has the most deranged nightmares because of the trauma he'd gone through that day.
You're not perfect.
I mean, just look at that. I do believe this is exactly why it's the scariest episode. The next morning, while Courage is brushing his hair in the bathroom, a fish approaches from the bathtub and tells him there's no such thing as being perfect and that he can do anything he sets his mind to. During Courage's next lesson, he purposely doesn't do as he's told, and the perfect person melts into the floor to disappear forever, leaving Courage perfectly happy with his imperfect family. The only movie Courage is a part of as of right now is the straight-out-of-nowhere Scooby-Doo meets Courage the Cowardly Dog from 2021, although there's also word that another movie will be coming out shortly. The movie starts with Courage and Scooby-Doo hearing a strange noise at the same time. Scooby, still being with the gang, decides to rush off to find out what it was, with all of them chasing after him. They all end up in the middle of nowhere, which is the town that Courage lives in.
You're a dog. Uh-huh. Me too.
They find a group of cicadas attacking Courage and Scooby. Together, they squash them all and are invited into the Bag's house. They hang out and tell stories and watch TV until they all get an invite to attend dinner at the mayor of the Middle of Nowhere's house. When piling into their vehicles, it is shown that a queen cicada takes Eustace's place. The cicada runs Eustace's truck into the mystery machine, and the gang presumably defeats the cicada, and they reunite with Eustace and continue to the mansion.
Guess what?
What?
Booga, booga, booga!
Once they arrive, they begin dinner, and the gang tries to tell the mayor about all the creepy stuff that's happened to them in town. although the mayor is extremely dismissive and doesn't actually listen to Courage at all. The mayor suggests that they visit the museum, but Courage and several others stay behind to finish dinner. The food is so horrible, they go into the kitchen to find their own ingredients/food.
I'll get a new mustard.
While they're in there, they witness the Queen Cicada back at it again, this time devouring the mayor. This begins an epic chase scene between Courage, Shaggy, and Scooby, with the Queen Cicada in tow. Meanwhile, the rest of the gang finds a secret passage while touring the museums and notices strange things happening to the people surrounding this large machine, which is being powered by a meteor. All of a sudden, the chase scene leads them to the same room and they all crash into the machine. Once the machine is broken, gravity begins to act strangely. Everyone heads back to the farm, but once there, they notice corn growing. The first time I've seen anything on that desolate farm. The Queen Cicada is also there, and so are a bunch of smaller versions of her. Everyone begins to get abducted except for Shaggy, Scooby, and Courage. Shortly after, Shaggy gives Courage a big speech on how courageous he is, and also gets abducted. As per usual, Courage goes to his computer for help on figuring out how to stop the cicadas. The computer needs extra help, so they hook Velma's computer up to it as well. The computer tells them that they need the meteor in order to win, so they start digging a deep hole right under the house. They retrieve the meteor and free their friends and family, when all of a sudden, the meteor turns the Queen Cicada into a giant version of herself. After encouragement from Muriel, Courage also turns himself giant and fights the cicada to near death. He turns small again and runs off with the meteor. The Queen Cicada ends up getting crushed by the debris, and the gang unmasks her to find the mayor. But wait, they unmask again and find Cats and LeQuack. They tried once again to thwart Courage and his family and get rid of them all once and for all.
If it weren't for you,
I don't understand. What is happening?
The two are arrested and the movie concludes.